Wake up every morning, gotta seize the day. Got my dreams in my pocket, no time to delay. I'm on a mission, yeah, I'm on a crusade. Gonna make it happen, won't alone, get in my way. I'm a go-getter, no time for small talk. I got the
Okay, welcome. Another episode of Shock and Profit. This episode is called Apocalypse Now, when shit really hits the fan. And I think a lot of people are going to be excited about this. We're going to be talking about all kinds of topics that people like to speculate about, and we're going to give our speculation. And so, what would you do if everything you rely on suddenly fell apart? We're talking about when shit really hits the fan. And so, we're going to be talking about a few different topics here of hypotheticals that may seem a little crazy, and that goes from bank fails and market crashes to earthquakes and super volcanoes, the end of the world scenario with undead zombies, a more fast and deadly virus, AI becoming self-aware, nuclear conflict, or hacker attacks. So let's get us started with our first scenario, which is the global economic collapse. This is where banks fail, markets crash, and there's mass unemployment. So just to give you a little bit of a story, imagine waking up one morning to find that the money in your bank account has vanished into thin air. The ATMs all out of service. Your investments worth less than a napkin. As panic sets in, you check the news and the banks have crumbled overnight. Markets are in free fall and jobs are disappearing faster than toilet paper during a pandemic. Welcome to the day when the financial world hits the fan. The only currency left is chaos. So what do you think would happen in this scenario where the banks fail, markets crash, and mass unemployment? Where do you think that would lead us?
Yeah, it's going to be chaos. It's going to be everyone's going to be man for themselves. Each family is going to be their own military unit, essentially, you know. And those who are prepared are going to be hoarding everything, and those who are not prepared are going to be the ones struggling. Everyone's going to be looking for money, and if you're like me, you don't carry a lot of cash. Most of it's in the bank, right? So those people are going to be looking to trade, looking to steal, looking to fight. Yeah, it's going to be madness.
Now,
What are
do
your
you think
thoughts?
that, well, it's going to definitely start people panic buying. They're going to start hoarding things, and we have a social contract that we sort of adhere to now, and that's sort of going to go out the window. Like I think that the civil society may start to crumble, but it really depends on what type of community you have around you. Like, do you have people with you that like sort of share your values? Everyone has a specific purpose and an input in the community. That's going to make a big deal, and I think that there's a potential for two scenarios. There could be where chaos and everything kind of goes to hell, or people start to band together and sort of use their more primal instincts to develop security for themselves and start to find a different way to transact. Now that may be a lot further down the road, but that's how I see it happening depending on where you live.
Yeah, I was gonna say right there, geographically, right? If you're out in the sticks where everyone's a farmer and everyone's raising cattle, they're gonna be just fine. They're hardly gonna notice. Life is gonna go on. They're gonna barter with their neighbors, and everybody's gonna be just fine. But you talk about the city where the grocery store, that's it. Once the grocery store has been pillaged and looted, that's it. There's no more food. It's gonna be chaos, murder, you know, no holes barred. It's gonna be complete, disaster.
Yeah, I was reading an article the other day, and it was talking about, how long can society last without maybe food and water brought in, like maybe these big cities. And it's only going to be a few days before, people start to get desperate, which kind of makes people believe that it's not always the best idea to live in the city. Whereas, today it's sort of like the go-to for young people. Let me go to the city and try to make something of myself, and it's all good and great, but you always have to have a backup plan. And I think a big part of that is learning different survival techniques to kind of keep yourself alive. And that at that point everything's going to shift from let me try to build up a strong financial base to let me build up essential supplies so I don't die. That's probably going to be one of the main things. You're going to have to learn skills in business like bartering. You're going to have to learn skills of first aid, making sure that you don't, let a cut go untreated, and, make sure you have antibiotics on hand. You're going to have to learn how to treat specific wounds because it's likely that things happen. You know, the reason that our lifespan has increased so dramatically is because of all of these technologies and our reliance on each other. But I think when that reliance breaks down, you sort of at least have to have the basics of everything.
Yeah, you definitely have to have the knowledge to bridge the gap, as it were, for not having all this technology. And there's a lot of good books on the subject. There's actually a good book talking about a doomsday scenario. I think it's called 1 Second Later. But as far as the survival and medicine, there's a good book on the subject, and it's free. You can get it online. It's called Survival MD. Like it literally teaches you how to do a tracheotomy and what medicines to hoard and how to treat, a lot of the stuff going on. There's another book also on like how to raise your food and or grow your food and um how to make like pemmican and other kinds of like rations, dried beef rations with fat so you don't get dysentery, or not dysentery, but you don't get malnutrition. It's called what was that name of that book? The Lost Ways. You can order it online. It's fairly cheap. I think it's like 20 something bucks. Um,
Yeah,
there's
what
also
we'll do
like
is
email.
we'll
I was gonna
put
say there's
a link
links to
to
it.
these yeah in the description so that way people have a chance to look these things over and sort of get a little bit more information. But
Right.
what else is going to happen is there's always going to be an exchange, right? That's kind of how the economy works, even at the smallest scale. So people are going to have to learn how to barter and how to, negotiate. That's going to be important. I think we've gone over negotiating in the past. This is going to be a whole different level of negotiating. This is negotiating for your life,
Yeah, but the other
you
big
know?
skill that people are going to have to learn is salvaging, right? So I'm into a lot of science fiction, as you know, we've talked many, many times on things like this, but they say like the last World War, the next World War is going to be fought with nukes, but the World War after that's going to be fought with rocks and sticks because all technology is going to be gone. Everything's going to be broken. All the great minds who put all this together are going to be gone. And what's going to happen is people are going to break down and salvage whatever's left of this technology and use it for in any way they can. There's actually a pretty good video game on this called Horizon Zero Dawn, where you're like this person with a bow and arrow, but you're like finding little technology. Like there's an earpiece that lets them connect to a network that's still working for some reason, and uh, it's cool. It's a good game. But anyway, you're gonna break down stuff and make it work, right? Like if you're in a car wreck and you're lost in the desert, what can you take out of that car that's gonna help you survive in that desert? And that's ultimately what we're getting to, right? So salvaging, trading, finding what's useful. Oh, another good one, Book of Eli. He was talking about the guy was trying to get chapstick, and he's like, "Oh, cat oil used the same way, works just as good." But yeah, that negotiating, trading, salvaging, big
Right.
important things.
And then obviously, I think medically, people are going to have to learn some survival aspects, how to treat a wound, how to set a bone, things that
Yeah.
you typically would run to the hospital for. You're going to have to be able to handle those things on your own. And that's going to
Oh
be
yeah.
sort of like a universal concept no matter what happens in a shit hits the fan scenario. They call it SHTF. You have to know them. So
Yeah, I
and then
highly
there's
recommend that book.
which one? The Book of Survival?
Survival MD. Really good book.
Oh,
I
Survival MD.
refer to it as second aid, right? Because I've done first aid every 2 years of my life since 2001. But this book, it goes further in, right? Instead of just putting bandages on and treating burns, like it goes into like actual doing medical procedures that are you can do without a hospital, and fairly well. It's a really interesting book. It's good to have.
And it's funny because there's so many people in history and even up until recent times that have died that they could have been saved by just having a little bit of knowledge. And I think that's sort of like that's such a big deal. Like, just knowing a few things can save people's lives. So it's good to sort of have these things in the back of your head. Um, Other scenarios that could happen, there could be natural disasters, earthquakes, super volcanoes, solar flares. Uh, Let me give you sort of a breakdown picture of what it would look like. The ground beneath your feet starts shaking violently. Before you find shelter, a dark cloud begins to choke the sky. A super volcano just erupted. As you run for cover, your phone buzzes with a warning. A massive solar flare is heading straight for Earth, threatening to fry all electronics. This isn't the apocalypse you planned for, but it's Mother Nature's triple threat, and she's coming in hot.
It's actually something that could happen in Washington, that park, very famous park with the geysers. There's a super volcano under the ground, and it's overdue for an eruption. A hundred or more years overdue. What's the name of that park? I'm having a
Yellowstone?
senior moment over here. Yeah, Yellowstone. So underneath Yellowstone, the scientists have been checking, and there's a lot of activity going on, and they say it's overdue. There's another one somewhere else on the Pacific, I believe, but there are two super volcanoes that exist right now that could threaten, not a maybe full extinction, but a partial extinction of our species.
Right. And so what we would probably recommend in these scenarios is have some sort of a kit prepared, first aid kit, know your routes, know exactly which ways you can get in and out of where you specifically live. It's good to sort of make communities with people that, again, speaking like we did in the previous segment, communities that share your values that you can sort of go to. They have all these different things that you can follow online and you can apply to be part of like these emergency communities essentially that are blocked off and they kind of take care of themselves. I would
So
say
I
have a plan for some communication and maybe a chainsaw, like you would say.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, a couple years ago here in northern PA, we had a storm come through, and all of our line workers were over in South America helping out because they thought the season was over here. But we had a late season storm, and we were without power for 2 weeks, some people 3 weeks, and you couldn't even go anywhere because every road was downed, and the snow was so deep you couldn't really walk unless you had snowshoes. So they did clear the roads up until the point where the trees were down, and then you couldn't go any further. So if you had a chainsaw, you can cut that down, which eventually happened, and people were able to get out in a couple of days. Thankfully, a lot of people here were prepared. So I looked it up. It's in New Zealand, the Tampo volcano, and then
Okay.
Yellowstone caldera in the United States. So those are two super volcanoes, and the one in Yellowstone is overdue for its eruption. So this is a scenario that could happen.
Yeah, and obviously these are hypotheticals, but it's possible. Any of these things that we're talking about could actually happen, and it would be pretty crazy if they did. Now, since you kind of experienced these like natural disasters, like what you were saying, what happened in like your community? What was like the effect? How did people react? What did they do?
Oh yeah, so there was people stealing each other's generators. That was the main problem that we said there was
Really?
gunshots fired. Yeah. Um, but that was mainly the biggest problem. What they ended up doing is in my community, they had a warming station. So they brought everybody into the community building, the firehouse, that had no power and had no way to keep themselves warm, and they allowed them to go there and, stay warm. Luckily, I had a generator and I stayed on high alert. I was walking back and forth with my AR-15, just ready to get somebody trying to steal my generator. But
Really?
yeah, they we have a newsletter that goes out every month and tells you of all like whatever crimes, any gunfire, any whatever that happened inside of the community that the security had to respond to. And yeah, it was bad. There was a lot of theft going on. A lot of people got their stuff stolen. So
Did anyone react with like firearms and like did anyone get shot? Because I know like it's a bare arms type of area, right?
yeah, there were shots fired, but nobody was murdered. I think the shots were probably people shooting deer out of season,
Ah,
or it might
okay.
have been in season. I don't remember, but um, yeah, there was some gunshots fired. There was some arguments. There was some fights, but nobody was killed, and there was at least 15 generators stolen.
Do you think that it would be beneficial if like heading into an HOA or something where you have like an implied community that maybe they should give you sort of like here's what would happen in the event of an emergency backup plan? Are you in an HOA
Yes, I'm in
yourself?
HOA. Yep.
Okay, and when you get into the HOA, they typically give you like what the bylaws are, what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, or
Yep.
I mean, in my experience, that's what I've seen they do. So they should probably have something where, hey, if things go down, this is how we're going to organize and this is what we're going to do. It would make a lot of
Yeah,
sense
actually,
seeing as how more than half the country is in an HOA. So it's sort of like these people are already in an implied community already, you know?
yeah, absolutely, and that's a great idea because we're quickly approaching the winter, and that scenario can play out again. I'm actually friends with the president of the HOA here, so I'll reach out to him and say, hey, I'll put it together, but we should have a plan for, if something like this happens again, what are we going to do? I mean, I know that they organized to have that heating station, but we should have some kind of extra response, maybe like more like a neighborhood watch or something that will prevent the crime because all it would have taken is one person to find somebody stealing the generator. It would have been a shootout because everybody here is armed, you know?
Yeah, and
So
maybe you do something where like the HOA will have like a storage area for backup generators if people may need them, and then they'll just be added to their HOA fee at the end of the quarter or whenever you guys pay for using that
right.
generator and just return it. So that
Yeah,
way you don't
some
have
people
these
around here,
conflicts.
if they raise the friggin' maintenance fee $100, they for a year they flip out over here like it's a big deal. I mean, I don't want to talk bad about anybody, but a lot of people over here are on fixed incomes. They don't have like crazy, good careers. A lot of people are just, tree logging. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, that's not the most lucrative job. It's not like they're finance people or whatever
Right.
making money hand over fist. So, they're on fixed incomes, and when they raise things like that, it's hard on them. So that might not be the best way because people might be against it, but maybe instead of making the one warming station, maybe make a few because we have a few different buildings in the community. We have the office, we have the firehouse, we have the adult lounge, the kids lounge, the restaurant, but the restaurant is a business. But hey, if you got to shove people in there to make it warm so people don't, freeze to death, and that's what you got to do, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be, anything that we lay out. It's just like this is opportunity for you to sort of be creative. Think of something that everyone could sort of get on board with to try to mitigate any loss of life and try to make it so that people survive together. Because we're communal by nature, our species. We're not meant to be alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to hear from our listeners. If anybody has any suggestions, I'll definitely consider it, and I'll definitely bring it to like I said, the president of our HOA here and say, hey, here's some suggestions what we can do if we have another, situation where the power's down for a couple of weeks or whatever the case.
Right. And I think that chainsaw idea is pretty good. Maybe a hatchet, something that you can sort of clear brush with. And probably people need to learn how to start their own fires. That's probably going to be important
Yep.
if you're going to be cooking food and keeping warm if everything else goes
Yeah,
bad.
being prepared also, right? Like when you didn't have power in the house, we can still cook because we had a barbecue, but if you don't have
Right.
any propane and the stores are all closed and nobody's got power, having when it's storm season, you should have everything ready. You should have wood for a fire, you should have it covered. So even if you have to go outside and start a fire, and because it's warmer in front of the fire outside than it is in your house, whatever the case may be. Me, I have a generator. I have UPSs backing up my primary heater, my network, so I can still work in the event of power going down. And then the generator, when it kicks on, it powers everything back up. I make sure the ice chest is on the UPS as well. So if the refrigerator upstairs loses power, I'll just put everything down in the freezer. We'll cook everything immediately that's in the refrigerator that needs to be cooked. Um, you got to have a plan. Also, think about it. If it's freezing outside, just put the stuff outside. Yeah,
Right.
you have to worry
Yeah.
about the bears, but that's people don't think about it. Like, oh, my food's gonna go bad. Put it outside. It's
Yeah.
freezing
And
outside.
as far as the bear thing goes, you could put it on like maybe an extended tree branch where it's like elevated where they can't get to it, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. You put it all up in a bag and you hoist it up where they can't reach it, or you put it on your deck and then you block off the entrance to your deck with some wood. You know, they're
Yeah.
not going to come up on your deck. I've seen cubs do it, but I've never seen a full-grown bear on anybody's deck. I don't think they like it. I don't know why, but
Yeah. Hey, well, maybe that's something to consider. So probably anyone that's in their own community, just consider doing something like this for yourselves. It's a really good idea, and also probably a little foresight can mitigate some damage and disaster.
we should also touch quick on what if you're living in a more tropical environment than in a winter area, right? Because you can lose power from a hurricane, down south, and you'll be in a different kind of pickle, right? Because you don't have outside freezing where you can use, and people out there are more worried about, air conditioning, right? Like the heat can kill them instead of the cold.
Right. Well, I think the heat killing people is a lot less of an issue. I think it's more so like dehydration. So it's really like,
Right.
are people able to get to an area of clean water? One good thing you could get is a life straw that allows you to, it's like a straw that you can get on Amazon or any other online retailer that you can use in any water source. It'll be clean enough for you to drink at the very least. So that's going to be probably the main thing. Make sure your water is good. If you're not used to it, get some fishing in the south. If it's fishing is more abundant here, you can sort of just go in the ocean and get something to eat instead of having everything refrigerated. And then maybe light hunting here and there, because we do have, like, for us in Florida, there's woods and there's different types of animals too that
Lizards
you.
and yeah.
Yep, exactly. So it's different for every community, but there should be some type of a plan in place, I think. And they don't typically have that. I haven't seen it in most HOAs.
So the book The Lost Ways, it talks about how what cattails, those plants, the roots of the cattail are like sweet potatoes. They taste like sweet potatoes, and you can harvest them and you can cook them and you can, eat. That's good carbs that'll keep you alive. It also talks about hunting. It talks about trapping, setting traps to catch small animals that you can eat, snares and little, rock falls. Um, and it also teaches you how to make a filter. If you don't have that straw from Amazon, if you didn't prepare and buy it, you can get like a water bottle and fill it with rocks and smaller rocks and then bigger rocks and bigger rocks. And then, you still want to boil the water, but filtering out all the crap first is the first step. And then once you have water that's not filled, floating with dirt and twigs and whatever else, then you boil it to make sure that all the, you know, bacteria is dead, and then you can, when it cools down, obviously drink it.
Yeah. And so I think with these first two, we're talking about things that are way more likely than not. But the
Yeah.
next few are going to be a little bit out there. This one that we're talking about is like your traditional zombie apocalypse, classic end of the world scenario. So, just to kind of give you a laydown of the story, it starts with a cough, then a fever, and then before anyone could figure out what was going on, the dead were clawing their way out of the graves. Streets are overrun with shuffling corpses, and your neighbors are trying to eat you, and the government. Gone. It's you, the baseball bat, and whatever canned beans you can scavenge. Welcome to the new normal. The world has ended, but the dead, they're just getting started. So, this is sort of an idea that we've seen play out in the movies many times, like there's so many zombie movies and, the end of the world. And then there's funny ones like Shaun of the Dead. I think that'd be pretty interesting of how that would sort of play out. What do you think would be like, your first things that you'd like to make sure you have if this was to break out?
I definitely want to have weapons and food. And I'm not talking about a baseball bat. I'm talking about a bow and arrow, crossbow, semi-automatic rifle, semi-automatic pistol, lots and lots of ammunition. That's what I want to have to be prepared, and a strong building where they can't just beat the door down. Because when you have enough manpower, if you have 50 corpses banging on your door, your standard house door is not going to cut it unless you
Yeah.
reinforce it with wood and whatever else.
Well, I guess like sort of the unknown here is what's their speed level and what's their strength level and what's their intelligence level, because all of these things have a different role to play in what you're dealing with.
Yeah, so one of my things that I always think about, actually, believe it or not, I took a zombie class in college because I needed an elective. So I actually wrote a whole paper on this, like a 15-page paper on this. But the first thing you want to be able to do is observe them and see exactly what you're dealing with. And are there different levels, right? Like when somebody's first infected, they're not obviously not all decayed and whatever else. Are they going to be like in 21 days later where they're fast and they can push themselves harder than any human because they don't have to breathe and they don't have to, you know, worry about pain and fatigue? Or are they just going to be shamblers, like you said? Knowing what you're dealing with, what attracts them? Is it sound? Is it smell? Is it, movement? So you got to know what you're dealing with, and the only way to do that is to observe them.
Yeah, so a big part of that would be make sure you have like a secure building, secure location that you could at least in the temporary be able to see things without exposing yourself too much, you
Yeah,
know?
but with the society that we live in right now, right before if before power goes down and all that other stuff, you can like log into cameras in New York City and like they're going to be very prevalent in the cities. You can observe them safely through the cameras, before the internet goes down, and see what you're
Right.
dealing with and see how they're responding and try to. I know that there's no sound on those cameras, but at least you can get some seeing. Me, I'm out in the sticks, so I'll probably be. I have the advantage of there won't be so many, and I can probably scope them out from a distance and see what they're responding to and tap onto something and see if they, if they're looking or um
And how quickly they
the
react
hardest is going
too.
to, yeah, yeah. And the hardest thing is going to see how, are they responding to smell, right? Because you're going to have to like catch one or something to figure that part out, and do some experiments to see, if you cover yourself in blood or whatever, can they still smell you? Or, that would be the hard one to figure out.
Right. Or what repels them. So it's going to be sort of like a little bit of like a science experiment. How exactly do we kind of organize around this? I mean, it could be a scenario where, hey, maybe they hate the smell of frankincense or whatever. And that's what you just keep on you at all times. That way you sort of they stay away from you just because of that.
Also, how does it spread? Is it through blood? Is it through scratches? Is it through bites only? Is it the
Right.
saliva? What is the, because obviously it wouldn't be like a spiritual thing, right? It would be, um, if this ever did happen and play out, it would be some kind of disease, right? Like rabies that mutated or something to that effect.
Right. Yeah, I
Or a
actually, it's
mushroom.
funny that yeah, or someone eats the wrong thing and they have that chemical reaction. I mean, what you see now in the world is like there's random new diseases that pop up and that kind of happens pretty frequently. So although this is highly unlikely, it is possible. You never know what could sort of come out of these experiments and these labs that people have a tendency to put together, all in the name of science. But then it's something where you have to like they said in Paul Blart, observe and report, observe and
Yep.
report. Get as much information as you can and share it with your community. And that's another big part. Who is your community, and make sure that you have ways to test whether or not they've been infected, because that's going to be another
Yeah.
tricky aspect of it.
Yeah. And if you watch shows like The Walking Dead, what ends up happening after a while in these kind of scenarios when there's no cure and everyone's just turning is the groups of people end up becoming the bigger threat than the zombies, because it becomes an us versus them mentality.
Right.
Everybody's competing for the same resources.
Exactly. And that's where, the idea of scarcity really takes hold. I mean, I think a big part of this is you gotta learn how to grow your own food and learn how to farm and learn how to teach that, so that way you can sort of create larger and larger areas that there's food sources, and that will sort of, I think, tamper down. If you're able to create more abundance around you, you're going to have less violence and less issues between the coherent people, much less the zombies.
Yeah, I think again, like most situations like this, being out somewhere in the sticks where you have land and you have um less people, you're gonna have less zombies. So, but the problem is then how do you cordon off that land? You're gonna put up a fence, or you're just gonna find the place like a prison or something that already is fenced off and then turn it into a farm, you know,
Right.
raise animals,
Yeah.
bring some cattle.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. You have to make sure you have some sort of a barrier to entry.
Yep.
And that's where it's also going to be crucial to have people around that, know how to use the weapon. They can, be security function is going to be super important at that point, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah, so I mean, I would like to know more about the paper. So you said it was like 15 pages that they had you write about this?
Yeah, yeah, I can email it to you after. It's pretty cool. I uh
Yeah.
I put it all together and I had like a picture of all my weapons, you know, which is probably not as smart. I'm
And
probably on a watch list.
what were there like presentations or anything, or this was just something you handed in and that was the end of it?
I just handed it in. That was the end of it. It was an online school,
Gotcha.
I just,
Uh,
had to get the paper done and so I had to come up with a plan. That was what the paper was on. Like, what's your plan? So my plan was crazy. It was like I'm gonna take out all the bridges to my hometown. I'm gonna down trees on every path in the direction of my hometown. The idea is to keep anybody from the city from getting to here where we are. This way, you're cutting off a lot of where the zombies would come from. Because in a city, everybody's on top of each other. It's gonna spread super fast there. By the time it makes it up here, it was just like when COVID happened. Everybody up here, the numbers were like this compared to the city was like this, you know?
right.
the people are spaced out. They don't live on top of each other. They don't have as much contact with other people outside of the area. Most people live in the same and work in the same area, so nobody's really going into an area where they're going to get it and spread it. Same thing with the zombie virus, right? There's going to be less people around, less chances of it getting here, and the zombies are going to be fewer and far between because there's less people in general to be infected in the first place. Even if everybody in this whole town got it, you're still like a fraction of the amount of people in like New York City, you know?
Yeah, do you think that these things are going to have a tendency to change the way that we migrate and where people have a tendency to live? Like, do you think? Well, let's start with this. I know COVID definitely had an effect on the way where people moved and where they lived to begin with. It had effect on me, and I know lots of other people that kind of moved because of it. What do you think would happen in this type of scenario? Would be like all decentralized, all separate?
Yeah, I think everyone's going to have the same thought. Head to the hills, get away from the cities, get away from the people. People were
Right.
making offers on my house, and my house wasn't even for sale during the pandemic. People wanted to get
Really?
away from the city. Yeah. Yeah, like houses, people sold many, many houses on my street. Not that there's many houses on my street, but they were like looking for more of them. They were looking to get out of the city and get into the sticks. So I think the same thing would happen in these scenarios, which is why in my plan I was like, yeah, we gotta curb that, you know, cut down all the trees, make sure it's in nobody's getting where we are, at least not by car. So if they're gonna go on foot and they're probably gonna get killed on their way. So I'm not gonna have to deal with them, because I don't know how the zombies do it, but I'm thinking they're probably gonna just shuffle around where they are and hunt by however they hunt. Is it, like I said, sound, smell, whatever? I don't think they're
Right.
going to mass migrate, at least not in the beginning. Well, who knows? Maybe they do want to stick together and become hordes, and then just march as a horde. Maybe they have some kind
But
of hive minds because maybe it's like you said, like a spore that's controlling them. Like isn't it like a zombie ant that gets controlled and then it gets infected and does whatever the host or whatever the parasite tells it to do?
I mean, I guess it could play out a number of different ways. So that's something that,
Right.
definitely not an expert on this specific scenario, but this sort of leads us into, what if it was a scenario where they're not becoming zombies, but there's just like a pandemic, where people are actually like there's a low survival rate and it spreads very fast. 1 minute you're scrolling, the next minute, you're breaking news, new virus hit, and this one doesn't just make you sick. It turns into a biohazard on legs. Faster than sneezing, it spreads across cities, leaving hospitals overwhelmed and streets deserted. It's going to be one of those things where it's going to be tough for us to handle seeing the failures that we've had in the past with this. And I think a lot of it comes down to, I think there has to be a customized approach depending on the individuals and their tolerance, their risk tolerance. Just like investing, everyone should have a risk tolerance, and I think people with certain risk tolerances should stick together. That's probably the best way to do it. Um, I definitely the hygiene thing is going to be important. Do you remember during COVID when you were like washing your hands, wash the groceries down? I don't know if you had this experience. This was like during the early days, and it just like reminds me of like, hey, if this was real, hopefully we did the right things, but how would we know? You know?
Yeah, I did none of that. I only put on a mask when I was forced to. They wouldn't let me shop in the store without it. But other than that, I did nothing. I didn't carry sanitizer. I just figured, I'm healthy, I'm young. I read the numbers and the survival rate for people of my age group and people who are healthy and jog and whatever else, and it was minuscule. So I was like, whatever, I'll get sick, I'll get better. But if it was something like you're saying where people die super fast and it spreads super fast, that's actually a pretty good thing because the it's gonna kill everybody so fast that it's not gonna have the time to spread. Whereas if you have something that's in you for like weeks before you get sick, and then you go and spread it to everybody else, and then they all get sick, and then everybody dies, that would be the worst case scenario. But if it's like 2 days, you're dead from when you get sick. All you got to do is hold up in your house for a couple of weeks, and by the time you're out there, everything's done, everything's gone, everybody's dead. Not that
Well,
that's
that's
a
the
good thing that everybody be dead, but obviously the fact that you can wait it out essentially.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing too. So it could spread fast and maybe it could kill you fast, but maybe the symptoms don't show up for a couple weeks.
That would
And
be bad.
that's what would actually cause it to be so dangerous because
Yeah.
it can get from different place to different place without people realizing it, and then before you know it, boom, you know. So that's where I think it's going to get a little tricky. In the early days, I definitely probably reacted in an intense way, probably because like social media things that I saw before anything was like really up on the like on the internet, like information wasn't as readily available. At the time, I'm living in New York, and there it was like the central of everything. Everyone
Oh yeah.
was making like it was like the end of the world. And so, you start to see these things. And I remember seeing a video of this guy from China just pass out face on the floor. And that was like the start that made me think like, oh, maybe this is legit. And then as time went on, it's not that it wasn't real. It was just a matter of like the severity. And like I think the worst part about it were our overreactions. And so I think just like the zombie thing, we should be more of the idea, let's observe before we make a determination of how we're going to react to this, instead of just like, oh, one person had this reaction and everything's got the end of the world's here. Sometimes we can be more measured in our approach.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then,
Yeah.
you know, the media likes to sensationalize things because, you know, I don't know if it's for sure if it's because they're following some kind of guideline that they're trying to do, but we can all agree that they sell more subscriptions, if you will. They get more viewers if the story is more radical and more scary and whatever. So they want to sensationalize everything to the point where they're going to get more viewership at the very least. Um, and in doing so, you know, people are going to react the way they react because they believe that this, like you said, could be the end of the world. But if we're, smarter and we observe and we wait and we see and we keep in communication with each other and share each other's experiences, then we get a better idea of what's really going on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, like you said, the news is definitely one of those things where you have to really be careful of, and we've learned this recently, the sources that you receive your news from to be important because a lot of times you're getting perspectives and you're getting ideas for people, and they're not just reporting, they're more giving you their opinion, which doesn't always work as far as, their opinion could be wrong. And a lot of people's opinions were wrong in the past. So just be careful where you get the information from. And there's a lot of propaganda even on social media. People will put information out to try to persuade you in a specific way. So always try to get through the noise and try to figure out like what's a reputable source that you trust and try to get more than one, you know?
Yeah, what people don't realize is a lot of people on social media, just like the people in the news, they're trying to get their followership higher.
Yes.
So they might say the same sensational stuff to try to get more people to follow them so they get more views because they're going to get paid, right? It's all about money. It's all about the
Well,
money.
yeah, well, it's an algorithmic manipulation. Like they'll see, oh, well, if I say this extreme thing, we got this many views. Let me go even further that way, and they just continue,
Right.
continue until there's nowhere else to go. Because there's only so far you can go with certain things.
Right. But to pull it back on topic here, when the first thing first happened, I would in the event, like you said, this scary pandemic that's actually, gonna kill people really quickly. First thing I would do is I would get myself goggles, an M19 mask, or if I actually had like a breathing apparatus, that would be even better. And I'd get to the store and spend everything I have liquid on food, and I'd bring it back to my home, freeze whatever meats, This way I know my family's not going to starve, and then I would not go back outside again. That would be that. I would, if I had to quit my job, I'd quit my job, whatever the case may be. Hopefully, I can continue to work from home, figure out some other kind of way to make money from home, whatever. But yeah, make sure I have enough food for my family and stay in the house. And hopefully, this will all blow over in a couple of months, or they come up with a cure, or whatever the case may be. That would be the
Right.
plan.
And there's things that people can even do today if they want to go that route. There's things called like safe and ready meals or ready wise, and it's like basically emergency food stores. You can buy in advance to you just it's dry food. If it if you happen not to need it, you can go ahead and make it anyway before it expires. It lasts a really long time, 25 years. It's something in an emergency. These things will last. So there are emergency food stores that you can sort of participate in that will help you for the future.
Yeah, I mean,
Like MREs are another big one.
I've got some of those. I got MREs. I've got gallons and gallons of water in my shed that I hope I never need. And um, you can pickle stuff in mason jars, stuff like that that'll keep for a very long time. I actually get a email every day for 5 days a week from Ask a Prepper. It's like a prepper website that, sends out a newsletter every day and gives you some tips on some things you can do and, making things like pemmican and um, dried meat that will last for a long time that you can, use if you're ever in one of these situations.
Right. And the other thing is consider how people used to preserve meat a long time ago. They just used a lot of salt, right? That was how they sort of preserved everything. 'Cause there was no refrigeration. So it's something that people will have to sort of learn how to do.
Absolutely. So
Um,
what's
so
next?
so the next one, what happens in the event of an AI takeover? So basically the AI becomes self-aware. Right now we're dealing with a new, I would say we're turning on a new period in history where AI is becoming more and more prevalent. And it's sort of, I was watching a podcast the other day, and they were talking about how, it starts to pass this test where the responses and the information appears to be more human-like, and it's less robotic, and it's getting to that point where it's only getting better from here. There's like I forget the name of it, but there's this curve that basically every 2 years technology doubles in its ability and
Moore's Law.
becomes Moore's law, right? And it becomes half as expensive. So imagine where it's going to be 2 years from now and 2 years after that. So it's getting to the point where if it's already mimicking human interactions and it's like really difficult to decipher whether or not it's a person or not, what's going to happen when it becomes self-aware and wants to do things its own way? What do you think would happen? I think that the AI not necessarily want to change anything about us. Maybe it will just start to do things internally that will have nothing to do with us at all. We'll be the secondary species, and the AI will be the first. Like we'll lose our apex predator status.
Yeah, I mean, if it could just get the launch codes for all the nukes in every country and just hold the whole world at ransom. I've read so many books on this kind of thing. I was telling you about the one series that I like, but I mean, I've also watched all the Terminators. I've also watched The Matrix, and yeah, it's a scary scenario because if AI does decide that, it wants us extinct or it wants us to be subservient to them, or like in the movie with Will Smith where it just wants to protect us from ourselves because that's what we told it to do is to protect us, and it realized that we're the biggest threat to us, you know.
Right.
And then it just has martial law and makes us live like people under martial law. There's so many ways it can play out, but it's a scary thing, and we need to put some things in place. Listen to Elon Musk; he's even saying it, and he's the smartest person in the world.
Yeah. Like they were trying to put some controls on it so that way hopefully it doesn't get that way. But I think that a lot of times us people we try to ascribe what a human being would do with unlimited power, And I don't know if that's necessarily, I don't know if that would play itself out, I think the AI could maybe have ulterior motives that we can't even comprehend of because it's thinking in such the abstract and such a different way that a human being wouldn't think. That maybe it would just be able to develop things and create things and just continue to expand and will probably be manipulated without even knowing it. For example, okay, the AI knows it needs power to survive. They're going to create jobs that you think you're applying to a job for a big company, but you're working for this AI business that's basically self-created by the AI itself. And they're going to say, okay, we need you to go get these resources and these materials, and we're just going to start building nuclear power plants and things to make sure that we survive and they develop themselves using our labor. Us being unaware that we're working for a computer essentially.
Or, maybe we integrate ourselves with AI, right? We get a chip put into our brain, and so now we're part of the AI, so we're like brothers now. We're
Yeah,
like
well, I mean,
and
like
maybe they want to
Neuralink, right?
develop flesh like us so they can experience love and intercourse and whatever else, so they can have the pleasures that we get to enjoy, like eating. So maybe they want to make themselves a biological body, so we're kind of two of the same.
Well, I think that with the whole chip idea in your brain, if that happens to be like more ubiquitous and everyone's doing it, they'll probably be able to just tap into like how you feel and know those feelings, they wouldn't even need to create their own body because they're like, they're it's a different life form altogether, right? They don't have our motivations. They can just, okay, if we need to know this, let's figure out exactly how a human being experiences it. But for us, we think that our experience is the end all be all. but we don't know that
Right.
there's like other perspectives out there, and there could be more to like what would an AI desire, right? Once it becomes self-aware. That's something that I won't really be able to answer. Like
So
what do they want?
let's look at the other side of this, right? Let's forget for a minute that them taking over or wanting to cause us any kind of harm. What is it going to do to the economy when it does everything, right? What are we going to do? How are we going to earn money when, AI is picking up the garbage, AI is, running the world, running the power, running the, um, doing all the content creation, doing everything you could think of, every job, cooking, clean, like everything. What are we going to do? We're going to sit around, just populate the
Well,
world?
Well, no, I think that in that scenario, people would adapt and sort of have more time for thinking. And, I believe it was Ford that said thinking is the hardest work a human being could do. And because, like, most people don't do it, they work with their hands, their body, their limited resources. We'll be able to sort of, the people that want to do more will be able to, and the people that don't will have such a high level of basic living standards because it's provided for you at no cost once the AI is sort of developed, you know?
Right. But
So,
with our people in power, right? The royalty, the politicians, whatever. When all this is coming about, you think they're not going to want to separate themselves and be better off than everybody else?
well, yeah, I think that would be the natural human inclination, but I think that if we're able to create a base in society where even the bottom of the bottom experience like true luxury and wealth, what would be the benefit? Is it just because of our brains wanting sort of like that exclusivity that we have better than other people, or it's like the comparison thing? Then that's where it comes to us having the additional time. Maybe that would develop our thinking. Like there was a Renaissance. People would maybe improve their philosophies and try to come up with better ideas that, they don't necessarily, you don't have to compete with other people. Maybe you just learn to get joy out of providing things that a human being can provide, like maybe things that require special dexterity or things that require special, cognitive abilities that maybe the AI wouldn't even consider using because it's not a person. Why would it need to use them? Like emotional intelligence, something like that, or different leadership roles.
Right. But think about this. We have this mishmash world where we have some religious groups that want to kill other religious groups, and we have some people who want to kill other people. We have some people who think they're better than everybody else. We have a ruling class. We have royalty in different parts of the world. These people are still going to want to have their way, regardless of how our living standards are. So if we start improving, if the AI starts improving, and suddenly we no longer need garbage men, and suddenly we no longer need receptionists at the store. Suddenly we no longer need security because there's cameras and people just get arrested when they get home by robots. Like everything just keeps improving down this path. But these people of the different parts of the world are not going to change their thinking just because technology is improving. They're going to be looking at ways to like hack the AI to make it do bad things to other people or whatever. I mean, once we have that abundance and we have that time and we don't have to do anything anymore, there's still going to be people with their tendencies, and it's gonna change the landscape of how things happen and how people behave. But at the same time, you're still going to have the people who want what they want.
Yeah, and I think that, you're sort of speaking to like human nature that I believe, what we believe in the Christian faith is like we're born in a fallen state and we're like we become better over time and we, have faith. And I think that religion is going to be it's an important aspect of human life generally. Even throughout all history, before there was a specific organized religion, people believed things. There always were different gods and different ideologies that people sort of subscribe to over thousands of years. So it's not like a new thing, but I think that, you know, the AI being what it is, and we're talking about like true AI, where it's like general intelligence, it comes up with its own ideas and it can create and improve itself over time. Those rich people or those people that are in those positions, they will be displaced. They may want to use their power and exert their authority, but under an AI that's able to self-improve, there's going to be a scenario where they either go with the flow or they kill themselves trying with no results on their side. Like there have been so many scenarios. A good example of it is look at the stock market. How many companies are in the top five of the stock market now that existed 50 years ago? Giants topple and things change over time. And it's called a paradigm shift. At some point, some sort of crazy new technology, in this case being AI, displaces entire industries, displaces entire ways of being. And while these people may have the idea in their head that I need to be better, that idea won't hold water because you can't manipulate something that's kind of sentient and thinking on its own. You can try, but with a human's level, I trust an AI's level of technology of intelligence at that point, then that specific human being or their group of human beings, being able trying to manipulate. I'm sure that there will be scenarios where in the early days they'll be able to do these things, which you see now. People are utilizing it for all different sorts of methods. But when it becomes generalized and it's improving itself, that's it. I think that's game over at that point.
All right, one more thing I'm going to throw onto this question for you, and then we can move on to the next one after you answer it. So, okay, right now you have the people that work, don't have the time to get involved in a lot of stuff. And then you have these
Mhm.
other groups of people who protest and, you know, lament in the street and make trouble and whatever. They
Mhm.
have the time to do that because they're not working and they're maybe getting government assistance or whatever, or they're being paid to protest, whatever the case may be. What happens when nobody has to work anymore because the AI is in charge and all these people that also might have had reasons where they wanted to protest or fight or whatever, now they have abundance of time. And instead of using that time productively, like we've been discussing, like we would probably do, right? Because that's just who we are. There's a lot of people who would take to the streets and do whatever. What do you think?
Well,
How would that look, and how would the AI regulate that?
I think it would probably come down to sort of like an artificial reality for those people. So, like we have certain things like VR headsets and different like goggles and sensory things that they can sort of implement controls on this wild behavior and maybe even be able to train that behavior out of these people because it's like no longer like a necessary function. Maybe our brains will be modified to the point where we're no longer think like our brains are problem solving machines essentially. So if there's no issues and there's no problems around you, your brain will come up with them. And maybe that specific idea that you need to always problem solve will not persist because there would be a manipulation of the brains that you don't have to solve a problem all the time. Sometimes you can do things just for doing things sake. Sometimes, you want to just skin an apple just for the sake of skinning the apple, knowing what it's like, what does it taste like, what the differences are. There's things that you can be doing that would bring you joy without having to amount to like any sort of violence or, these types of clashes that you see.
Okay. Well, I was going to drop it, but you brought up something that made piqued my interest and I wanted to comment on. So, all right, what if we get to the point where now it's talking some like Black Mirror stuff, where you get to the point where you can have the AI study you and it can now create your consciousness, like duplicate your consciousness, and then we can upload it and then you can essentially live in a computer server forever. Or you can get put into a cryogenic sleep and have your brain entered into this reality like the Matrix, and you can live there forever because the you can sleep forever in this cryogenic sleep, and you can exist in this world that's fake, but it's just like the real world, and you can live there forever. And then there'll be no need for humans to make more humans because they'll be living in this dream world forever and never have to age, never have to die. You
What would
know,
happen in that scenario?
I mean, that would be a pretty good scenario. What do you think?
I think there would probably be like a bifurcation of people. Some people will say, yes, let's go for it. I want to go all the way. And then there's going to be people that sort of like stick to themselves and do their own thing and continue community. So there's going to be a populace that's under this basically AI hypnosis. And there's going to be others that kind of revert to like a primitive state. Like even today, all the technology we have, the phones that we have, there's still people surviving in tribes in the woods with like very primitive technology. So I think that that would still be the case, but those primitive people that we're talking about are not really the like the bad apples, so to speak, the people causing riots and causing all of these protests. Those are people that just sort of want to survive and be left to their own devices. And I think a lot of people may choose that.
All right, one more. I'm sorry. So you have all this overabundance, you have all this time, you have nothing to do. What about
Mhm.
overpopulation?
I just think that human beings throughout history have come up with innovative solutions. And I think that the issue is the authoritarian lean for having control over what people will do. And at some point, they were scared that we weren't going to have enough food and that there's not enough. And then there were new developments in farming that can yield double the amount of crop for the same amount of input. And these new technologies will continue to emerge. Even now, they do like cloned beef and they do like all of these experiments. They may not be the best things for us, but there's definitely going to be new and innovative things coming out that would advance our survival.
What about colonization of other planets?
Um, that's interesting. I think that one thing that they would need is it would probably start just completely digitally. Maybe it wouldn't even be people, like you would send out specific, you know, power apparatuses and robots and things to sort of get things started. And you have them programmed and they create it for you before you get there. And then it's really going to be a matter of speed. How long does it take us to get from where we are to over there? And would it even be necessary? Why would we want to do it? Like maybe
Just have more
we find
room.
ways.
We're growing our people. Yeah, we might have enough resources to eat, but we're getting to the point where we're we're stacking people, 50 stories high and on every inch of the globe. There's no more space for people. We're talking, 100,000, 200,000 years from now. AI has tamed everything. We don't have to worry about
Yeah.
food. We don't have to worry about doing anything, but we're running out of space. There's not
Well,
even enough breathable oxygen at some point, you know?
Well, I mean, that's where I would say the innovation would take over. Okay, if we need certain oxygen, we provide more plants. Oh, if we need more land, maybe we start to develop brand new islands in the ocean. Maybe we start to utilize the air that we're not using right now. Like we're able to, we figure out new and innovative ways to build like in the sky. There's, I don't see our ability being hampered just because it hasn't been developed yet. I think that a lot of things come out of necessity. Like you said, like, okay, where are we going to go? At some point, someone's going to have to figure that part out because otherwise it will result in death. And it's usually a situation where we do adapt. There was articles in the newspaper when when people used to ride horse and buggy saying that like we have a crisis, there's going to be shit all over the streets because there's so many horses driving around, and then the car came around, and now that problem was eliminated. So I just think that it's a scenario where there will be innovation, there'll be more, and I think the innovation will happen so much faster with the AI, because it's able to pull from so many different ideas at the same time and sort of like condense it and you can utilize it. I think things that we can't even comprehend will be created because of it.
Yeah, I think once we get the quantum computer and the AI together, that's going to bring us to the next level. I think that's where we might start to see the beginnings of whatever's going to happen starting to happen.
Exactly. Yeah. And basically, so now we kind of went over what is more realistic to all the way down to the less realistic, and now the AI thing, which we see in real life, it's sort of a higher likelihood of happening, and I would say almost guaranteed to happen. Let's talk about what our immediate issues could be, and that would be like political tensions leading to a nuclear conflict. I would say this is probably the worst case scenario, and we should do anything in our power as human beings to negate this and maybe anything we can do to stop the use of these things because it's sort of senseless. Like all of it is, one big power grab for some sort of land that they perceive to be incredibly valuable, and it just turns out to just be dead bodies with the person who sent out the order standing on the rubble, like, okay, now you won, but what are you ruling over? Nothing. You're ruling over ashes. It's like, it makes no sense. I think that it's such a bad idea. And I don't know how we would stop like these global leaders from sort of like simmering down and maybe coming up with a solution instead of a much worse problem. But, again, leadership, there's different levels of it. And the people at the highest level that we know in our own public discourse and other countries they're pretty much the most incompetent people that you could even imagine. So I don't think that they're going to be able, and that's why these things are on the table because they think that people are just expendable. It doesn't matter to them, the human life. That's why certain things are on the table. So
Yeah,
that's
I
kind of
mean,
my
like you
thoughts on
said,
it.
it'd be a Pyrrhic victory, right? It's like in a Game of Thrones when Daenerys wanted to burn everything. It's like, yeah, you're gonna be Queen of the Ashes, like you said. It's senseless. You're just gonna kill all these people. So what? So you can rule over nothing. And our leaders, their answer to, okay, they have nuclear weapons now. We have to get nuclear weapons so we can, have more than them. And you know, the threat of mutual destruction is the only thing that's preventing the nuclear war. That's the best answer they came up with. Starting the arms race, the Cold War. We're
Yeah,
kind of back
and
there.
it does seem that
Scary.
way for sure. Yeah, I mean, but it's one of these things where I think you kind of have to have like the grown-ups in the room say like, "Hey, we're not going to do this. You may have this idea in your mind of how you want things to go, but we are not going to go along with your ideas because they're terrible and they're going to lead to these issues." And I think that when these leaders are confronted with like second order and third order consequences of what they think they want to happen, ideally they would, sort of change their mind. If this stuff does happen, one way that you can prepare, and it's not going to be much, iodine tablets, and if you can, a radiation suit. What else could you really do? And also again to the food supplies.
Yeah, I mean, short of building a bunker, what else are you really going to do? If you live near a bunker, know how to get there, um, have a plan where you can, have a go bag and as much supplies as you can get to bring it there. But other than that, hopefully you live outside of the blast zone. Hopefully you live in a place that's not by a military base that's going to be bombed, and hope the wind doesn't blow the radioactive material in your direction. That's really all you can do. Pray.
Yeah,
Scary.
and
Scariest scenario.
our hope is that this will never happen, but it's something to be aware of. And if you're going to prepare for it, that is the ultimate shit hits the fan scenario. Pretty much all you could do is exactly what we just discussed. Try to get out of the cities if that happens. I remember New York City ran an ad a couple years ago about what happens if there's like a nuclear fallout in the city. Like, why would you even put that out there?
Maybe they're preparing because they know it's something that definitely can happen. All it's going to take, one nation throws a nuclear bomb at any other nation, and that's it. Starts a chain of events where everybody's got bombs is going to bomb somebody else, and that's going to be it. The nuclear winter.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's where the idea behind the mutually assured destruction comes from, is that hey, if I happen to be crazy enough to send it, then it's just going to come back on me just as hard.
Yep.
I get that idea behind it, but I think that we should all of the resources that they're utilizing to just kill people can be used into such a positive and productive way. They can make people's lives so much better if they use those same mental resources and mental capital into like just improving people's standard of living generally and just becoming more productive. But
Problem
oddly
is
enough,
nobody gets
we have
along.
people,
It's like
yeah,
this,
nobody gets
you
along
have
and
borders, there's different rules and behind different borders, and these people over there don't want to do things the way they do them over there, so they stay over there. And then you have other people who come across the borders and want to change the place they just came to. It's like if you didn't like it, if you don't like where you're going, why'd you go there in the first place? But anyway,
exactly.
realistically, you've got three countries, or four countries: China, Japan, America, and Russia, who has submarines that have nuclear capabilities. So they're the biggest threats, right? Like they can bring their sub undetected to the coast of another country, and they can launch tons of nuclear bombs in every direction and screw everybody up. There's other countries with nukes, but do they really have the navy that's going to be able to get the nukes to where they got to go, or they're going to have to shoot them long distance? When you shoot them long distance, you can have them picked off by early detection systems, early prevention systems, but the ones that are coming from subs, they're hitting their targets. So that's the real
Yeah.
threat.
And I just think that it's time for them to sort of come together. Let's have a conversation and let's sort of like we could hash out our problems if people were just willing to talk. And I think a lot of times big issue is like there's ego maniacal nature of these leaders that they don't want to speak to each other sometimes. Sometimes they do, but when you don't, that's where you have issues. When you try to, I'm going to keep everything to myself. You have a neighbor down the block. Imagine you're in a home and you and your neighbor have a dispute on the fence And it's like, okay, you're just not going to speak to each other and just let it fester and get worse and worse and worse until like one person comes out with a bat, like these things happen because of lack of communication.
Yeah, I mean, I don't watch the shows. My wife likes to watch all these murder shows. I call it murder porn. But like Neighbors, I can't even think of the name of the show, but she watches one of them where the neighbors go at it and they keep escalating. Like they start putting signs on their lawn talking about the other person, and it always escalates to somebody getting killed. It's
Yeah.
crazy, and that's the same way the nations work. You just got the wrong person, the wrong attitude, doesn't want to back off, and then it escalates, and then you have violence. And it's kind of human nature.
Yeah. I mean, it's happened throughout all of history. How many wars and how many bloody battles have been fought, over border disputes over how someone wants you to live your life versus how other people want to live their life.
Even before those societies, when it was just tribes. This tribe
Yeah.
has things that we want. We're going to go over there with spears and kill them all and take their women and children. Like, that's just the way humans became on this planet.
Yeah. I have a theory that, well, I think it's probably pretty close to reality is that the reason that there's this whole idea of like prejudice or racism, it stems from those times when you knew what the people of your tribe looked like, and if someone wasn't from your tribe came in, you would be very suspicious of them, thinking that they want to do you harm. Obviously, it's like an antiquated way of being. That's not, in today's society, like you have more advanced ways of communicating, so there's no need to do those things. But that's sort of where they stem from.
Yeah, and you would think with you know, the ability where everybody can have their voices heard, you would think that the nations, the leaders would listen to those people and say, "Oh, well, people really don't want this." But the problem is with the control of the media and social media companies, only letting certain thoughts and certain ideas come to light, they have a skewed idea of what's actually going on. And, the people, the majority of the things that you see are coming from the people filled with hate because that's what they want you to see. But if you go out and live in the world, at least in many communities, so many people just get along. So many people, socialize together without trouble. But then, you have some areas where people just hate each other. And it's terrible.
Yeah, for sure. So I think what we'll do is we'll probably put up a poll on X. You'll see it, and it'll be hashtag shock and profit if anyone wants to see it. And we kind of want to get what you think. Leave some comments. Think about what you'd like us to discuss next. We should probably just quickly summarize everything. We're going to be putting in a lot of links in the description for these books that we think would be very beneficial to you. Remember that it's good. It's not going to hurt you to prep and have some emergency stores of food, emergency stores of water. Definitely get your community together that you want to work with and be with on a regular basis, and just continue to improve yourself. The best way to attack any problem is to constantly be looking at what you can do better. Be the change you want to see.
Did you want to go over what the experts listed as the top 10 or whatever most likely to
Yeah,
happen?
yeah. So yeah, go if you want to take that away, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll just go through the summary real quick. So the experts, they basically said the most likely is climate change. I tend to disagree, but that's what the experts say. The second is nuclear war. I do agree, and that's the scariest. A pandemic. We've already just gone through one, but another worse one can happen. Like you guys said, or like you said, a lot of experiments are going on. So the next one, artificial intelligence risks. We talked about that. Biotechnology risk. Same thing we just said with the pandemic. I think the both of those go hand in hand, so it shouldn't be separated. But one that we didn't talk about is an asteroid impact, which yeah, that's also scary. But hopefully, we can overcome something like that with some missiles in the sky and global systematic collapse, which also we talked about. So we were pretty much on par with what the experts said as far as what could happen and what's likely, with the exception of that one.
That's right. And I think learn your first aid. Make sure that you're able to get access to this food and train up. Learn how to use your weapons,
Yes,
and that's
staying
one
fit.
of the most important things. Yeah, stay fit. You have to be able to run. You can't be in a scenario where you're a couch potato eating Cheetos every single day. Yeah, it'll only get you so far. You need to be able to handle yourself. Probably be able to do a couple pull-ups, a couple push-ups, be able to run outside. without getting
100.
winded. And all of these things are going to lead to a higher likelihood of surviving.
Yeah, and if you're a family man, you have to make sure your family is also ready, right? You can't have an out of shape family because if you have to drag them through, to a bed out of a bad situation where there's no vehicles and you have to get away, you can only go as fast as the slowest person in your family, or you got to carry them, you know?
That's right. That's right. And you better be strong enough to carry them for a long
Oh yeah.
distance too. That's
Yep.
not easy carrying a body.
Oh yeah. Especially climbing with
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, can't even imagine. So, if anything, we're going to be putting it up on X, hashtag shock and profit. Let us know what you think. Leave a comment, reply on this video. We're going to be getting some more content out there, and I think we're on track to hopefully we close out the year with at least 10 more videos.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We try to get one a week.
All right. Exactly. All right then. So we'll sign off here. I've been Prophet, and he's been.
Wake up every morning, gotta seize the day. Got my dreams in my pocket, no time to delay. I'm on a mission, yeah, I'm on a crusade.